On our third session for the day, we will have Zara and Ben leading it again. So we are now at session 3, which is valuation in the project cycle. They will focus on how valuation fits within the project cycle from planning to monitoring and evaluation. And Zara and Ben, please, over to you again. Thank you.
So there will be 2 consecutive sessions on valuation in project cycle, and then on how to supervise the valuation process and the valuation specialists who are engaged in the process of valuation, including how to do review of valuation, or sometimes it's called valuation audit. And Ben will explain what is the difference in the valuator's terminology between valuation review and valuation audit. So we will start with valuation and resettlement processes. Then we will talk about meaningful consultation on valuation, and then about grievance management and the role of valuation specialists there. Before we will go into that, I wanted to share with you voices from affected people, those whom we work for, and you as implementing agencies. And we see a lot of colleagues from other banks and also consultants who join these sessions. So what people are sharing about the valuation. So we did case studies on effectiveness of grievance redress mechanisms. So people are talking and complaining about unclarity about how valuation of land, crop structures, and other assets are carried out for the purpose of compensation, so that they are not clear on the methodology. They have perceptions sometimes, and it was also discussed during the previous session on expectations, like perception of getting less than their friends and neighbors, which receive more for the same type of assets. These type of issues sometimes result in the valuators or surveyors advising people not to share and discuss the evaluation with others, which results in the confusion with people and mistrust when they are advised not to discuss the compensation amounts. So how and what approaches should we adopt when we are implementing safeguards and valuation under the safeguards? Now, just to remind the main several milestones. So preparation of the draft resettlement plan, which is usually done based on the draft design. Then update of that draft resettlement plan based on the detailed design. Implementation of the resettlement plan, and then construction. So let's look at the valuation across all these 4 stages. Before we will go there, if I may ask Victoria to share a poll question.
So this poll question, what challenges or difficulties were encountered in engaging valuation specialists or supervising the valuation process? It's a long form answer, so you can go ahead and give, a short, detailed answer of any challenges or difficulties that you encountered, and we'll keep a record of those. And then Zara will try to address any of those in the future. I'll leave this up for a little bit of time, Zara, just because it will take some people a minute or two to write a reply. Okay.
I think, do we have another poll about specialists participating in consultations in the project? Did evaluation specialists participate in consultations in the project? If we have such a prepared.
Yes, here you go.
So if you can look at the questions and answer based on your, our major audience are implementing agencies. So based on your experience, did evaluation specialists participate during consultations in your project? Yes or no? Did you need support from valuators in handling compensation-related complaints? Did you have such a experience? And please, consultants, also join in answering these questions, because you are the main force and support for implementing agencies when it comes to planning and implementation of safeguards. And the last question is, have you received support from valuators in handling compensation-related complaints?
So we can flash the session 3 question again after we finish the session 4 question. As you're putting in your responses. So most overwhelmingly, the responses are yes to the second question, where people did need support from valuators. The first question on whether valuation specialists participated during the consultation. Most of the time, yes, but it's a 60-40 ratio. So
Good.
yeah, and that is a good one. Yes.
Yes.
And I think question 2 really demonstrates that valuators are really important in the process of handling complaints related to valuation.
And
so,
as you can see, oh, excuse me, Ines, please go ahead.
No, so I think once we finish this poll, maybe Victoria, you can quickly flash session 3 because people were not able to see that, I think, or respond to that. And Zara, back to you, please.
Okay, thank you. For session 3, we will come back to that question later, and you will have a chance to answer in the chat, and we will try to follow the answer in the chat. So very interesting from that poll results that in more than half of the projects that you experienced, valuation specialists participate in consultation, which is very good. But we need to do more and to involve in all the projects so that valuation methodologies that are developed for the projects are customized and adapted, tailored to the project and needs and impacts. Now, the second question was quite obvious. Yes, we all need support from valuators when we have complaints related to valuation. This is a technical area, and sometimes we cannot see or we have some conflicting views, and it's very important for valuators to provide that support. But as you can see from the last question, it's not always available. And this is an issue of proper planning across the milestones of large resettlement plan preparation implementation. Let's move to the presentation and close the poll. Thank you so much for sharing your experience. So if we go to the next slide, should I close the poll? Okay. Now, I will just quickly go through the main milestones. When we are preparing draft resettlement plan, it's very important to identify all the impacts that will be compensated, restored, all the livelihood-related impacts that would be under the project. Then to develop a tailored methodology, the story of restoration of the assets, story of rehabilitation of people's incomes. And the draft LARP should have that methodology and approach, even if we do not have final number of affected people and we do not have final design. So the story of restoration and story of rehabilitation should already be in the draft LARP. Then, by the way, it includes also the design of the allowances. It's important to involve valuation specialists and specific methodology to design the allowance. There are a lot of resettlement plans that have vulnerability allowance for poor households or for female-headed households. So how we calculate that? What is the story behind? What is that support that we will be providing in kind or in cash? Both needs valuation approach to be attached there. Now, third element is consultation on proposed methodology. Can you hear me? There was another.
Yes, we can. Yes, we can hear you perfectly.
So consultation on the proposed methodology with affected people and also other stakeholders. Here you should consider involvement of different governmental agencies that may be part of the process, like cadastral agencies, land banks, local government that have some baseline data or are part of the different activities, for example, related to agriculture when it comes to assessment of agricultural incomes. Consulting with people will help to get more details about the affected asset, what people are losing. And also consultation will help you to understand the market, how market is functioning, what factors you should consider when you are doing comparative analysis. And we will discuss the methodology of comparative analysis next Monday. Consultations also will help to inform people about the approaches, and this will help to manage expectations of people. And this was discussed during previous session. You may have transparent methodology, which is fair and which is consistent, but if the project would not be able to communicate it properly to the community, there still could be mistrust, and there would be difficulties in finalization of the resettlement plans, but then in implementation of those, there would be more complaints, more dissatisfaction, which will impact the project and the benefits at the end, the timelines of the project and the delivery of the benefits to the affected people.
Sorry, can I jump in there? Just 1 second. Yeah, it's really important that it's recognised that very often the policy, the national policy, is not the same as the development bank's policy on valuation. For example, most nations have a compensation system which is market value plus some disturbance payment, but not necessarily reinstatement. So, for example, we know in some countries that the government provide the valuers, so they are employed by the government to and then seconded to the projects. But you'll very often find then that those valuers just follow the government policy. And in fact, in some countries, they could go to prison if they do not follow the government policy. So being absolutely clear about what the valuer is going to do and then how the other costs are going to be calculated is really important at the very beginning. Sorry, Zara, I'll pass back to you.
And just for non-valuator audience, do you see how Ben always referred to the terms of reference? So valuators, the output that they will give to the safeguards people to continue to work with is really very linked to the terms of reference. So terms of reference for valuation for final LARP should be in the draft LARP already. So please ensure your consultants develop TOR for the final LARP if you would have a final LARP and you would assess the final compensation amounts. And of course, estimated compensation with proper contingency. This will help you in the timely delivery of the compensation. Update of the resettlement plan. If you have this approach of draft and updated resettlement plan based on the final design, in the updated resettlement plan, there should be final valuation. And also please consider timeline with payment of compensation. When you will pay that compensation, could you consider still the assessment final, or you need to have in a final LARP some procedures that would ensure you to customize the compensation and revise it due to inflation or potential other economical risks. Then if there is a need for additional verification processes of the market value, to define that procedures in the final LARP, to consult with affected people on the methodology that have already been applied, and handling the concerns. This will be also the part of the final LARP. Just to add here, why concerns and not grievances, because we assume that when you are preparing final LARP, there is no any acquisition yet. So there is no impact to have grievances, but people do have a lot of concerns. And the case study that we shared during the first session on restoration, this came from the concerns of affected people during finalization of resettlement plan. Now, if we would go to the last two components, implementation of resettlement plan. So during implementation, we need to consider handling of complaints and revision of valuation if there is a need, to reevaluate due to inflation and economic crisis, to monitor the complaints related to valuation and to see if there are any systematic issues. And we will discuss at the very end one case study where systematic issue and valuation was discovered due to the complaints of affected people. So monitoring of systematic issues through monitoring of complaints is very important task during settlement plan implementation. And audit or review of the valuation if there is a need. During construction, it's useful to have valuation specialists and to have access to the services of valuation specialists during handling of complaints. Then there could be a need of valuation for unanticipated impacts, temporary impacts, environmentally induced impacts, for example, due to vibration, physical relocation due to vibration that could result in the damages to the properties. So you may need valuation services during construction as well. And in order to ensure compensation delivery, there should be clear budget sources defined, and their availability should be ensured. So I just tried to list the tips on the meaningful consultations on valuation. Communicate regularly and clearly with affected people on valuation process, which includes timelines. Think through who are the people who should be involved and which authorities should be involved there. This includes consultation on methodology, and it should be presented and discussed from the very beginning on the rates, including when it comes to compensation for trees, crops, allowances, and there could be some process of negotiation and discussion with affected people on that. On consultation, compensation amounts also could become a part of the consultations, maybe not in a wider group, but in a smaller groups context. Ensure participation of valuation specialists starting from the first early stage of consultation meetings. Please ensure here that valuation specialists understand what messages to deliver and when to deliver to affected people, not to confuse them more, not to misinterpret the policy and approaches under the project, and also not to overpromise affected people. So this communication should be approached very carefully. Define evaluators' role in consultation process. Are they leading the consultation on valuation? Are they supporting with answering the questions? Are they just witnessing the process and gathering the feedback from affected people further to develop methodology for valuation? Think through that story line and the role that you will assign to valuation specialists during consultations. Eliminate practice of verbal agreements and commitments during consultations. This is a source of a lot of misunderstandings and future complaints. Maintain good documentation related to valuation in terms of methodology, in terms of the logic behind, and I think next Monday during a discussion on international valuation standards, we'll discuss more about approaches to document valuation records and how it should be done. And ensure that there is a cooperation between stakeholder agencies responsible for valuation and compensation, different stakeholder agencies. In different countries, there are different institutional setup. There is state cadastre in some countries that contributes to valuation, local authorities that plays a role in the valuation processes, or some specific banks that are involved in expropriation processes. So ensure that that you identified properly the stakeholders and all are involved in the process. And the last one on the grievance management, valuation specialists should be an integral part of the grievance mechanism, starting from involuntary settlement planning to implementation and construction. And you can need their services during revision of valuation reports if there are complaints, for clarification letters to explain affected people on the methodology, to participate in the discussions when complainants approach you on the compensation, or when they bring alternative valuations, you would need support from valuation specialists. And there could be additional need for valuation audits or review of valuations where you would need their support. So with that, we can open the floor for questions and then move to the last session on supervision of valuation processes.
Thank you very much, Zara and Ben. So thank you for the presentation where we explored the vital role of valuation throughout the cycle, from initial planning to construction, and the importance of grievance management. So we heard about the steps involved in integrating valuation into the resettlement process, in particular on developing of the resettlement plan, emphasizing the importance of transparent consultation, meticulous documentation, and the active engagement of valuation specialists to ensure the legitimacy and accuracy of the compensation process. So now I've picked up a couple of questions. Maybe Ben, you want to respond to the statement on what happens when, the implementing government agencies argue that, the land acquisition plans exceed the national frameworks and are worried about potential legal consequences. And then another question is what happens if environmental impacts occur during construction? Who is responsible for paying compensation, the contractor or the PMU? And then a question which I think I picked up correctly, but maybe I'm misunderstanding. Should asset valuation be conducted just once? Or is it more effective to do it 2 or 3 times throughout the project? I'm not sure I understood this correctly. So maybe start with these and then see how we do for time for the other questions popping up.
Yeah,
Thank
sure.
you.
Read first 2 and then over to Ben for the last question on several valuations. So on the first question, if I got it correctly, on the difference between national legislation and approaches under national legislation and potential different valuation requirements to ensure that it's replacement cost. So usually under MFIs finance projects, there is a loan agreement, and loan agreement defines the responsibilities of the borrower and refer to the safeguards policies as the legal framework to be followed in addition with the national legislation. Now, draft resettlement plans or final resettlement plans are also part of that loan documentation before when the loan is signed. So it's very important in the draft of final resettlement plan, which becomes part of that package of the loan, to ensure all these details are very well explained and clarified. In different countries, to enforce it more, because loan agreement, when it's signed in the most of the countries, it has a legal force that should follow. In some countries, to enforce it more, the framework for the project or settlement plan for the project could become a government decree or a sectoral decree that gives the opportunity for implementing agencies to feel them a little bit more relaxed when they are applying the procedures and approaches that are not in directly results from the national regulations. So first is loan agreement. Ensure that draft LARP reflects all the nitty-gritties on the approaches to be followed. And second, you may explore other legal approaches and legal procedures to enforce even more on lower levels of settlement plan implementation. So this is, there is a note here that loan agreement signed after settlement plan, and this is the point because a settlement plan becomes attachment of the loan agreement. So you are preparing settlement plan, then it is attached to loan agreement, which is signed between the MFI and the government. And this gives that enforcement to the procedures and approaches in the draft settlement plan. And again, going back to the presentation that we just shared, when you prepare draft plan, ensure that draft methodology is there, but also that final methodology and TOR for final valuation is there. This will ensure that processes are attached to the loan agreement and are signed and agreed with the government. Thank you.
That's really important, that, Zara, about getting that understanding by all parties. It's later on when something comes as a surprise and probably the budget isn't big enough at that point, and so the whole project then gets delayed because these issues weren't addressed at the appropriate stage. And understanding which parts the valuer will be able to assist with and which parts aren't are really important. But moving to the number of valuations that you might need is again really important. It's not that, and I'm going to say something now which will be very unpopular with some valuers, it's not the valuer's job to be fair. The valuer's job is to undertake a valuation. The fairness bit comes in the resettlement and reinstatement plans in that process, so that the valuer isn't looking at the individual family which is occupying a piece of land or a building. They are there looking at that, and they call it in the international standards the asset or the liability. They don't talk about land, they don't talk about property, they don't talk about trees. They talk about assets and liabilities because that is what is being valued. So it's a very factual process which the valuer is undertaking. And the definition of market value, not fair market value, that's a development bank term and an accounting bank term, but the market value is on a specific date. So there is a date of the valuation, and it's an estimate of what the valuer considers to be the amount that could be expected to be for the property or the asset to be sold at as of that date. We can't, unfortunately, gaze into the future and guess what a value might be in 4 or 5 years' time. But what you can do is put into your instructions, and I'm sorry we keep going back to those terms of reference, we can put into that terms of reference that we would like the valuer to give a market condition statement. And that market condition statement covers what is happening in the market. Is it a stable market? Is inflation likely to occur? How big is the inflation rate at the current time, and is that likely to pertain? So it's asking the valuer to make a comment about the market at the moment, and that will give an indication about whether a revaluation might be required in the future. And again, thinking about the terms of reference, it might well be advisable in a volatile market where many of your projects are taking place to have that initial valuation, and then perhaps a review of the valuation, but perhaps without an inspection, so that you can, so that the valuer can do an update, but without all the extra costs of reinspecting, if that was appropriate.
Okay, thank you both, Zara and Sue and Ben. So we have quite a few questions on the process, on the actual valuation, some related to the cutoff date and timing of informing the affected people on the process.